Good morning, this is Shelby Law with the Great Basin Fire Potential Briefing for Monday, August 17th, 2020. Fire potential impacts for the next few days are shown here with near record temperatures expected across much of the Great Basin for at least the next couple of days. We're also expecting a mix of wet and dry thunderstorms to continue over mainly western Nevada today, with some drier storms moving up further north into far western Idaho. Tomorrow, thunderstorms will continue over western Nevada, but also spread a little bit further north and east into Idaho with some drier storms mixed in there. We may also see some very isolated dry thunderstorms, or mix of wet and dry thunderstorms, develop over far southern Nevada. And then on Wednesday, some of the moisture fills back in through the central part of the Great Basin for some drier storms over eastern Idaho, or eastern Nevada, and western Utah. So it's going to be a very active next couple of days with near record ERCs as well, and definitely record in some areas. The heat and the thunderstorms, definitely expecting an increase in initial attack and some new large fires as well. Yesterday we saw a pretty good amount of lightning over western Nevada with the precipitation mostly limited to this little area here over far western Nevada. And some of these other storms had just lighter amounts of precipitation. Fire activity continues to increase with that initial attack and increase in lightning activity over western Nevada, but we're also seeing some larger fires in Idaho and Utah as well. Certainly still the potential in many areas for those fires to get large. Precipitation for the past 7 days is shown here. Really very light amounts for the past week. It's been extremely dry over the entire geographic area for quite a little while. ERCs remain very high, particularly over Utah and eastern Nevada, where we're setting records for the time of year for many stations. And those values continue to increase over Idaho as well as the heat really builds in up there. Should expect to see some of those areas continue to rise and possibly move into the 97th percentile over the next few days. Taking a closer look at the northern Sawtooth Mountains here, those ERCs are above normal for the time of year and on a pretty steep rise with the increased temperatures and low relative humidities. Further south over southwest Utah, those values are also setting records and have been for a few weeks now. Still much above normal for the time of year and still quite a bit above the historical maximums. As for live fuel moisture, a couple of sagebrush sites here, one in far western Nevada near that fire that originated in California. Sagebrush is near the historical minimums for this 30-year period of record. It's quite low and dry over there. And the same story in western Utah. Those values are very dry, have been for the last couple of months, really all summer. And the values there are setting historical records for the past 20 years. This morning's satellite imagery shows the broad area of high pressure in place over the Great Basin, really bringing very warm temperatures to the entire area. And we can see this tropical moisture wrapping around that high pressure, sending those thunderstorms yesterday mostly into western Nevada, and we'll see them move a little bit further into western Idaho today. And that moisture will continue to wrap around the high pressure and produce thunderstorms around the periphery for the next few days before it is weakened just a bit and flattened, knocked down, and we'll see some of that moisture move further southward into the interior Great Basin. So for today, we do have high-risk triggers issued for hot and dry for most of Idaho, Utah, and eastern Nevada, and then high risk for lightning over western Nevada up into far western Idaho. That's as that moisture wraps around that high pressure. So we can see here where we're expecting those thunderstorms to develop over western and central Nevada and then up into southwest Idaho for today. High temperatures here on the right, 102 in Boise, 104 in Salt Lake, 114 down in Vegas. So very hot. On Tuesday, more of the same as expected, except we'll see that moisture continue to wrap around the northern edge of the ridge and produce thunderstorms across much of Idaho and into western Wyoming. So we do have high-risk triggers issued for all of Idaho and western Wyoming for that increase in thunderstorm activity, and then continued high risk for hot over Utah and eastern Nevada. Taking a closer look at where we're expecting that precipitation, some of the storms could be on the wetter side over the central Idaho mountains, including the Payette there, maybe on the drier side further south and over western Wyoming as well. We could see some lingering isolated thunderstorms over far western Nevada, but by this time, after 3 days of thunderstorm activity, not quite as concerned about the threat there. Still very hot for much of the Great Basin. On Wednesday, we begin to see a trough developing off the Canadian coast here that will start to, begin to break down the ridge just a bit. And so we will see some of that moisture being pushed further south into the central Great Basin on Wednesday for an increase in thunderstorm activity over eastern Idaho and western Utah, or eastern Nevada, and western Utah. The conditions in these areas have been very dry for quite some time with near record ERCs and near record or record low sagebrush live fuel moisture values. So certainly worried about these areas as we see lightning move in there by Wednesday, and continued high risk for any of the areas that don't see lightning here for that continued hot temperatures. Some of our dryness levels further north move to yellow by Wednesday, with some of those storms bringing a little bit of precipitation for a day or two. So for Wednesday, here's where we're expecting those thunderstorms to develop by Wednesday afternoon. Later in the day, in the evening, we should probably see some thunderstorms fill into western Utah and southern Nevada. So expect that to happen later, possibly evening hours on Wednesday. And we'll see some wind pick up also over northern Nevada and the higher elevations of central and eastern Idaho and western Wyoming out ahead of that trough as it begins to develop over off the Pacific coast. So the 3-day precip totals are shown here. You can kind of see where that high pressure is and the rotation around that high, where most of the storms will develop on the periphery of that high pressure system. That's where we'll see that precipitation. So pretty limited on the interior Great Basin, but we may see a little bit, especially over the central Idaho mountains and possibly western Wyoming. On Thursday, the ridge weakens even further. Still going to be quite warm, but not quite as hot further north. And may see some thunderstorms over the higher elevations of Utah on Thursday. And then on Friday, we begin to see some drier air move in, particularly to Nevada and Idaho, where we could perhaps continue to see some isolated higher elevation thunderstorms in central and eastern Utah on Friday. Another tropical storm down here. We've got some moisture associated with it, so we'll see what happens to that guy as we move into next weekend. Looks like maybe some moisture will be returning to the western U.S. anyway, around that ridge by maybe next weekend. And then here's Sunday, so possibly a better chance for some moisture to fill into the southern Great Basin. So still a week out, so we'll be watching this, but definitely an increase in thunderstorm activity pretty much everywhere in the Great Basin at some point this week. So here's the 7-day totals. Again, the best chance for measurable precipitation is going to be on the outside of the Great Basin, outside that high pressure system, with lighter amounts inside. Extended forecast calling for above normal temperatures, especially over the southwest and the southern Great Basin, with below normal chances of precipitation a little bit further south, equal chances over Idaho. And this concludes today's fire potential briefing. Please check back tomorrow for the latest updates.